Won $10,000 and boyfriend wanted a car. But after a big fight, I spent it all. Now he's angrier than ever. And I don't know how to confess. They say that money changes everything. And maybe it does, or maybe it just shows us what's been there all along. Hidden beneath the surface. This story is about a seemingly ordinary moment that ended up changing my entire life. It's about a lottery ticket, a toxic relationship, and the moment when I finally decided to take back my life. It started with a simple indulgence, a weekend lottery ticket, something my boyfriend used to call a stupid tax, because to him, it was nothing more than a waste of money. But for me, it was a little sliver of hope, a small chance that maybe, just maybe, life could change. One Friday morning, as we were walking together to grab coffee and a few small items at the corner store, my boyfriend bought his usual cigarettes, and I bought my fruit and a lottery ticket. We had this routine every day, but this day was different. As we approached the store counter, I could feel the tension between us. It had been building for a while now. My boyfriend, James, was always angry these days, angry about school, angry about his job, angry about our financial situation. We were struggling, but mostly I was struggling. He was a full-time student, working only part-time during the summer, while I was juggling both a full-time and a part-time job to keep our household afloat. I supported us both while he put in minimal effort, yet always demanded more from me. Still, I held out hope that one day, things would get better. That evening, after work, I scratched off the lottery ticket, not really expecting much. I almost dropped it when I realized I had won $10. My first instinct was to share the good news with James, but when I excitedly showed him the ticket, he barely reacted. "You probably spent more than that over the years on these stupid tickets," he muttered, dismissing my excitement completely. Something broke inside me at that moment, an expectation that he would at least be happy for me. For us. But the truth was clear, he didn't care. All he wanted to know was what I planned to do with the money. And when I told him I hadn't decided, he suggested we buy a car. I should mention that neither of us had ever owned a car before. We didn't need one, and we couldn't afford one. We lived in a city where public transportation was more than sufficient. And buying a car would only be a burden, with parking fees, maintenance costs, and the expenses of keeping it running. Besides, I didn't even know how to drive. Still, James insisted. He wanted a car so badly. And he didn't care about the consequences. He argued that a car would be a symbol of success, something that would make him feel proud. He spoke passionately, his eyes filled with a strange sense of entitlement, as if this money was his by right. But this wasn't about a car. It was about control. James was used to getting what he wanted from me. He had mastered the art of sulking until I gave in. He thought he could steamroll me into spending the money the way he wanted. But this time was different. I had worked hard, taken care of our home, and gone above and beyond to support his education and dreams. All I wanted, just once, was for him to see me, to acknowledge my effort, and let me decide what I wanted. Instead, all I saw was greed and selfishness. The next day, James dragged me to a car lot. I didn't want to go, but I didn't know how to refuse without causing a huge argument. He wanted to embarrass me in front of the salespeople, hoping I would cave under the pressure. He talked about test driving cars as if we were actually ready to buy one. I stood there, feeling like an outsider in my own life, a spectator to the chaos he was creating. When the sales representative asked me if we had any particular car in mind, I simply shook my head. James turned red with frustration, and we left empty-handed. Later that night, we had a terrible fight. The kind of fight where every bottled-up resentment and hurtful thought comes spilling out. The kind of fight that leaves you wondering if there's anything left to salvage. James said things that hurt deeply, and I found myself saying things I never thought I would. I told him he was entitled, that I was tired of taking care of him, that I didn't want to be his safety net anymore. He yelled back that I was selfish, that I was supposed to support him, that the money should be ours. Something shifted inside me after that fight. I had always been a people pleaser, putting my needs aside to make everyone else happy. But I was tired of it, tired of sacrificing myself for someone who didn't even appreciate it. So, I made a decision. I went to my mom's house and sat down with her, telling her everything. She listened, and for the first time in a long time, I felt heard. My mom was always a practical woman, and her advice was simple. Do what makes you happy. So, I took that $10 and I spent it, but not the way James wanted. I paid our rent in advance, all the way through the end of the year, and I donated the rest to charity. I wanted to do something meaningful with it, something that felt right. James didn't know yet, but it felt liberating, like I was finally taking back my power. It wasn't about the money, it was about standing up for myself. James eventually found out. Of course, he was furious. He yelled, accused me of betrayal, said I had ruined his life. But by then, I was numb to his anger. I realized it wasn't my responsibility to make him happy. He was angry because he had lost control over me. And that wasn't something I was willing to give back. In the days that followed, James became distant, and our relationship fell apart. He broke up with me, but it felt more like I had broken free. In the aftermath, I learned a lot about myself. I learned that I was stronger than I thought, that I could stand up for myself even when it scared me. I learned that love isn't about control or sacrifice, it's about partnership and respect. James had never really respected me. He had seen me as a means to an end. Someone who would support him while he chased his dreams. But what about my dreams? What about the things I wanted in life? I moved out of the apartment we shared and into a smaller place that felt like home. I adopted a cat, started knitting, and focused on myself for the first time in years. I found a new job that paid better and allowed me to do something I actually enjoyed. My life was still far from perfect, but it was mine, truly mine. And that made all the difference. A few months after we broke up, I heard through mutual friends that James had joined a Christian rock band and started using cocaine. It was a harsh reminder of how little I actually knew him. How much he had hidden from me. He had dropped out of school and was living a chaotic life that I could never be part of. I felt sad for him, but I also felt relief. Relief that I had gotten out before it was too late. Reflecting on everything that had happened, I realized that life is too short to stay with someone who doesn't see your worth. I had given James everything, my time, my energy, my love, and in return, he had given me nothing but stress and heartache. Leaving was the hardest thing I had ever done, but it was also the best decision I had ever made. And that $10? It changed my life, not because of the money itself, but because of what it represented, a chance to start over. To choose myself. To build a life that made me happy. In the middle of all the chaos, there was a moment when I realized that I didn't need anyone else to validate me. I didn't need James to tell me I was worthy. And I didn't need a car or a fancy life to prove my success. All I needed was the courage to stand up for myself. To put my own happiness first. To say no to the things that hurt me. That was the true lottery win, finding myself. Reclaiming my life. And finally learning what it means to be free. Life has a funny way of showing us who we are. Sometimes through the most unexpected moments. Winning that lottery ticket didn't make me rich. But it gave me something far more valuable. The courage to rewrite my own story. To be the hero of my own life. And to never again settle for anything less than I deserve. Husband wet the bed, threw a tantrum, and is now refusing to speak to me after I told our daughter the truth. I'm feeling confused and isolated. It was an ordinary Tuesday night. The kind where everyone was lost in their own dreams. Safely tucked away in their shared haven. But little did they know. The peace of the night would be shattered in a way they never saw coming. The sudden realization of dampness in the sheets pulled Emma out of her sleep. For a moment, she assumed it was their 6-year-old daughter, Mia, who must have snuck into their bed and had an accident. The reality, however, was more surprising. It wasn't Mia. The culprit was her husband. Tom, a man known for his confidence and control, was embarrassed beyond words. Emma didn't expect such an outcome from the start. She thought it was a simple accident. One that could be laughed off. But Tom was horrified. He leapt out of bed, yanking off the sheets in a panicked frenzy, unintentionally waking Mia, who looked at her parents with confusion in her sleepy eyes. She asked what was going on, and when Tom remained silent, Emma tried to make light of the situation by explaining that Daddy had an accident. She thought being open would be best, especially since the truth was already obvious. But that honesty struck Tom like a blow to the gut. His face turned crimson, and his eyes glared at Emma with a mix of embarrassment and fury. It was a look that Emma had never seen from him before, a look of sheer hatred. For the first time, she felt a small pang of fear, not because she thought Tom would harm her, but because the man she knew seemed to vanish in that instant. He stormed off to the bathroom, slamming the door shut, and stayed there for nearly an hour. Emma tried to remain calm, but the feeling of unease lingered. The next day, things were still tense. Tom refused to talk to her, and it seemed like he was harboring a deep resentment for what had happened. Emma, frustrated, confronted him. She insisted that it was just an accident, that it wasn't worth the cold treatment. But Tom snapped, accusing her of humiliating him in front of their daughter. He was deeply hurt, and his pride was wounded in a way that Emma hadn't anticipated. She retorted, perhaps more harshly than she intended, that he was the one who humiliated himself, not her. The argument left a heavy silence between them. Days passed, and Tom still ignored Emma, which made her feel isolated and helpless. She wanted to fix things, to make Tom understand that it wasn't her intention to make him feel small. Eventually, she apologized, for laughing, for telling their daughter, for everything. Tom listened in silence and finally admitted that he panicked, that the shame overwhelmed him. They apologized to each other and agreed to handle things better if anything like this happened again. But the damage was already done. The emotional distance lingered, and Emma couldn't shake off the feeling of guilt. Tom's behavior worried her. He had always been sensitive, but this time, his reaction seemed deeper, more visceral. He refused to see a doctor. Even though this wasn't the first time he had wet the bed, both times happening when he was stressed and exhausted. Emma knew something wasn't right, but she didn't know how to help him if he wasn't willing to help himself. In the following months, Emma began to notice more about Tom that had always been there but now felt amplified. He struggled with his emotions, especially anger, and would often withdraw, making it hard for Emma to reach him. She realized how exhausted she felt trying to cater to his moods, always walking on eggshells to avoid triggering another episode. And then, the worst happened, a suicide attempt around Christmas. It wasn't the first time, but it still hit Emma like a truck. She hadn't seen it coming, and the guilt of not noticing his struggle sooner weighed heavily on her. Tom survived, but their life changed dramatically. He needed more support, and for the first time, he agreed to therapy. The wait times were long, but he started seeing a psychiatrist and a nurse in the meantime. Emma hoped that this time things would be different. She hoped therapy would help him find stability and learn to manage his emotions better. Around April, things seemed to be looking up. Tom was getting back to his old self, and they even received unexpected news. Emma was pregnant. It was a shock, and not entirely a pleasant one at first. Given all that had happened, they considered terminating the pregnancy. But in the end, they decided to go through with it. At 12 weeks, they found out they were having twins. The news was overwhelming. They were already parents to Mia and her 4-year-old brother, Max, and the thought of raising 2 more children when they were barely holding themselves together was daunting. Tom tried his best to support Emma during her pregnancy, but his own struggles often got in the way. One day, he came home in a foul mood and, out of nowhere, declared that they were stupid for keeping the babies, that they should have terminated the pregnancy. Emma was stunned. She asked why he was saying that, and all he could say was that it was how he felt. She tried to calm the situation, but Tom was in no state to talk. He locked himself in the bathroom, and when he came out, he left the house, slamming the door behind him. Emma was left to pick up the pieces, comforting the children, pretending everything was okay. She was terrified. She texted Tom, asking if he was okay. He replied that he was and that he'd be home later. When he returned, he was visibly high, something he occasionally did to cope. He apologized, but Emma was too emotionally drained to care. She realized that she wasn't even angry anymore, she was just tired. Tired of the constant ups and downs. Tired of feeling like she was the only one holding their family together. Tom's erratic behavior made Emma question whether staying in the marriage was the right thing to do. She loved him deeply, but the emotional toll was becoming unbearable. She wanted to believe that therapy would help him, that he would change, but deep down, she knew that things might never get better. She feared for the future, not just for herself, but for her children. What kind of environment were they growing up in? How long could she keep pretending that everything was okay? Despite everything, there were moments of light. Tom had days where he was the man she fell in love with, kind, attentive, and full of love for their children. On those days, Emma allowed herself to hope. She hoped that the man she loved would win his battle against the darkness that seemed to consume him. But those moments were fleeting, and the uncertainty of what each day would bring left Emma in a constant state of anxiety. One night, after a particularly rough day, Tom opened up to Emma. He admitted that he was struggling, that he felt like he was failing as a husband and a father. He told her how hard he was trying to be normal, but that it was exhausting. Emma listened, her heart breaking for him. She knew he was trying, but she also knew that she couldn't fix him. She could only support him, and hope that he would find the strength within himself to keep going. Emma's story is not unique. Many people struggle in silence, their pain hidden beneath layers of shame and fear. Tom's bedwetting incident was just the tip of the iceberg, a symptom of deeper issues that had been left unaddressed for too long. It was a stark reminder of how fragile people can be, and how important it is to address mental health openly and without judgment. In the end, Emma's story is one of resilience. It's about the challenges of loving someone who is struggling, about the sacrifices we make for those we love, and about the strength it takes to keep going when everything feels like it's falling apart. It's a reminder that while love is powerful, it cannot heal everything on its own. Sometimes, the best thing we can do for those we love is to encourage them to seek help and to take care of ourselves in the process. Emma and Tom's journey is far from over. They are still navigating the complexities of their relationship, still trying to find a balance between love and the challenges that life throws at them. But they are trying, and sometimes, that's all we can do. To try, to hope, and to keep moving forward, one day at a time. My ex-GF opened up 2 credit cards in my name after we broke up. She ran up about $7,500 in debt. And her current boyfriend is now threatening me. Imagine this. You finally end a toxic relationship, ready to move on and rebuild your life, only to find out months later that the person you trusted, the person you once loved, has been stealing from you in ways you could never imagine. This is exactly what happened to me. One day, while trying to piece together my taxes, I realized something was wrong. And that was just the beginning of a nightmare I wouldn't wish on anyone. It started with my ex-girlfriend, someone I once shared a home and dreams with. I thought the relationship was behind me, packed away in boxes like our old things. But when I was served with a lawsuit for over $5 on a credit card I never knew existed, I found myself unraveling a web of deceit I had no idea I was tangled in. She had used my personal information to open 2 credit cards, run up thousands in debt, and vanish without a trace. In that moment, everything came crashing down, the realization that love had been twisted into something harmful, leaving me both emotionally and financially broken. After moving out of our shared house, I lost track of some paperwork, including my tax returns. I never thought much of it. In the chaos of moving, things often get misplaced. Fast forward to when I was served with a lawsuit. I learned that my ex had used that very information to steal my identity. There were not 1 but 2 credit cards in my name, filled with charges from her favorite stores, Nordstrom, Macy's, and more. The bills had been piling up unnoticed, and now I was stuck paying the price for her shopping sprees. In disbelief, I reached out to her, hoping that somehow this was all just a huge mistake. But instead of an explanation, I got anger and denial. The conversation quickly escalated into her screaming at me, accusing me of making false allegations. Moments later, her current boyfriend called me from a blocked number, threatening to make my life a living hell if I didn't stop accusing her. I found myself at the mercy of 2 people who clearly had no boundaries. My anxiety skyrocketed as I realized how deep I was in. The boyfriend had a record. A quick search revealed charges of aggravated arson and firearm offenses. It wasn't just about money anymore, it was about my safety. I was dealing with a dangerous individual, someone who would go to any lengths to protect my ex. This wasn't something I could handle alone. I was afraid, both of the retaliation and of the financial disaster looming over me. But then, something inside me snapped. Why should I let fear dictate my life? Why should I carry the burden of someone else's wrongdoing? I turned to the Reddit community for advice, and the overwhelming consensus was clear: fight back, report the identity theft to the police, freeze my credit, and take control of my future. Their words gave me strength. I walked into the police station the next day, nervous but resolute. The process was quicker than I expected, and soon I had a police report in hand. I sent that report to the credit card companies and the credit bureaus. And almost like magic, the fraudulent accounts began disappearing from my credit report. My credit score, which had taken a massive hit, slowly began to climb again. I even learned through a mutual friend that my ex had been arrested. It turned out that the county had issued a warrant for her arrest. And she had been pulled over on her way to work. For the first time in months, I felt like justice was being served. The whole experience left me with a lot to think about. There were lessons in trust, in vigilance, and in the importance of standing up for yourself even when you're scared. I learned that love can sometimes be twisted into a tool for manipulation. But I also learned that I had the strength to reclaim my life from the wreckage. And while it was a painful journey, it led to a sense of empowerment I had never felt before. This wasn't just about recovering financially, it was about reclaiming my narrative. I wasn't going to be the victim of someone else's choices anymore. Instead, I wanted to turn my story into a beacon for others who might be facing similar struggles, to show them that there is a way out. And that standing up for yourself is always worth it. The kind of betrayal I experienced isn't unique to me. I was reminded of a friend from college who once told me a similar story. Though hers ended differently, she discovered that her brother, whom she had always supported, had taken out loans in her name. For years, she kept it quiet, afraid of tearing her family apart. But in the end, the weight of the debt became too much to bear. And she confronted him. It wasn't easy, and it cost her the relationship. But it also saved her from financial ruin. Sometimes, the people closest to us are the ones who can cause the most harm. And the hardest part is finding the courage to speak out against it. Another example that comes to mind is from a coworker whose partner ran up thousands of dollars in debt using her credit cards without permission. She found out when the collections agencies started calling her. Unlike me, she was able to settle things privately. But only because she acted quickly and sought legal advice before the debt spiraled further. The lesson here is that hesitation can be costly. If you suspect something is wrong, it probably is, and acting on it could save you months or even years of financial hardship. At the end of the day, my story isn't just about identity theft, it's about empowerment. It's about understanding that you have the right to stand up for yourself. No matter how intimidating the situation may seem. Ultimately, what I want people to take away from my story is this: no matter how dark things might seem, you have the power to change your narrative. You can reclaim your life, even when others try to take it away from you. And sometimes, standing up for yourself is the most important form of love you can give, the love that says, "I deserve better."